Hello, everyone. I think it's still morning yet, so good morning to you. My name is Edith Hudson, and I have been a lifelong servant leader. I am a first generation child, and I didn't know that truly my bossiness was what made me a servant leader, but always looking to help my sibling and my family members. So, been involved in servant leadership really for my entire life, but formally really recognized maybe about 10 years ago or so that I was part of the servant leadership movement, served my community with Milwaukee's Police Department for about 25 years, retired, and now I'm serving the community again, but as the leader of the Marquette University Police Department. So I will continue my life of service and definitely work to impact the community just as you're doing, Dick. So thank you.
Wonderful, Edith. I'm Dick Pieper. A few of you don't know me. I've been in the electrical business for 52 years, 60 years actually, but 52 formally. Married, 53 years, 3 children, 11 grandchildren, all live within 20 minutes. Nobody in jail and nobody in the hospital. So I am really blessed. I also really, similar story. I started out my life very early, not knowing my journey in a servant leadership. And so I've been on it a long time. But about 15 years ago, we discovered the Greenleaf Center and some of the works, and we'll be talking to some of that. The main purpose of this session is to go over the nuts and bolts. Everybody likes the nuts and the bolts. Even though they've been here 10 times, they still want to go over the basics. So that's what we're going to do. Edith and I are. So this is the seminal statement. Do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? When you look about you, how did your mom, your dad raise you? How does your supervisor, your company, follow, treat, enhance you? These are tough tests. Nobody gets it all. Nobody gets it all. And do people follow your example as a result? What's the effect on the least privileged in society? That's a nice tough one. Will they not be further deprived in the way in which you lead? So with that, any comments about that one?
I do. I actually have a story
Give us
about
the
the
story.
seminal statement. So in my work with Milwaukee's Police Department, I had the privilege of working with a young man who was a community leader in a neighborhood around 2nd and Center Street, if any of you are familiar with the city of Milwaukee. And this young man totally committed to his neighborhood. He was the block watch captain at 19 years old, and just an awesome young man with a heart to lead. And he doesn't look like your typical leader. He had a lot of tattoos and at first glance really didn't look like someone that you would expect to be a block watch leader. Well, he became a little bit disenchanted that his service wasn't received in the way that he had thought it could be or should be received. So he left Milwaukee, went to another town, and I just felt he'll be back. He is destined for service to this community. He'll be back. So about 2 or 3 years later, after our initial encounter, he came back. He called me and he said, I want to thank you for being such a great example for me because I have applied for the police department and I'll be in the police academy class in the next couple of weeks, and I just want to thank you. I was so pleased that he called me, that he came back to Milwaukee because I knew he would. But I was also pleased when I saw him, maybe about a year or two later, he was assigned to do community work just as he had really as a block watch captain, as my team worked and served him. He's now serving a community in the same capacity. So it really does come full circle, that service that we provide for other people, they then learn and grow and become servants very similar to the way they were served.
It's very rich, but you don't know how it's going to come out. It's heart nurturing. Research, lots of it. Put others first. These statements are from research papers, academic, PhDs that have proven these statements. And this is another pass at some of these statements that we have in the hallway there. Put others first. Help others to grow and succeed. That's what Edith did. And I'll bet everybody in this room to some degree has been doing it. It's the natural inclination. Greenleaf said that. It's natural. Demonstrates professional skills. Empowers others, not themselves. Acts ethically. Are champions of the community. These are the new seminal ones that have come out of research in the last 5 or 8 years worldwide. This material, and you'll see it at the end, I'll give you a list that we have on our website, has just skyrocketing in the world. Skyrocketing. Servant leadership is no longer a foreign term in Wisconsin. I met with the governor, and he said, I told him what we're doing in character education, servant leadership, and he said, oh, I had a bunch of these business guys in here, and that's all they wanted to talk about. He was astounded. Our past governor spoke of servant leadership. Our mayor speaks of servant leadership. Any award banquet that I've been to, they speak of servant leadership. Now here's the seminal. These are authors. And Ken Keith wrote the book, The Case for Servant Leadership, just loaded with examples, explicits. Don Frick wrote the biography of Greenleaf. And what I call Robert Greenleaf's quotes really comes from another author that was in the center. Today, we're talking about stewardship. Stewardship. I'll give you an example of stewardship. People don't just, you can give your time, your position, how you can network in a community. You can give your dollars. That's the easiest thing to do. Your time is a little tougher. Your position, that can be challenging for some. Depends on where you're at. We had somebody who was obviously going to be the president of one of our companies. And I couldn't get him to give to United Way. Just could not. So every year, he had this reason, that reason, this other reason, this other reason. Finally, I got him to give something, 1,000 or 2. I figured, well, that's as far as I'm going to get. He retires. He comes back to help out one of our companies. And in that company, he challenged that whole unit, business unit, to start participating in United Way, and he personally would match every dollar they came up with. So that's a big transition. He also said in my biography I put together for my grandchildren that he learned the art and the fun of giving. He looks forward every year at the end of the year to do his giving. So you don't know, and he was a charger. He was in your face. He would debate and argue with you. A very good guy. But that's what happened to him. Stewardship.
Stewardship.
Time, position, resources, money. Top-down power model. That's what we have been accustomed to. Servant leadership is completely different. Another term we use is lead by serving. People are more comfortable with that term. Servitude or serve. This is about serving. Lift up the capacity of others. Light the way. Moral authority granted. When you are a servant leader, you automatically get moral authority. It's just, you don't even know why or what or how did that happen, but all of a sudden they start calling you differently than they would another person. You have any thoughts on any of this?
I think especially with law enforcement, the moral authority is something that is especially important because what we do, I think, stands out maybe a little bit more. Our mishaps especially stand out a little bit more. And if you don't have that moral authority as you lead people in that industry, then I think you really is disastrous. Absolutely disastrous.
It is. Questions you have of us?
How can we take the discourse that's going on in this country and reduce it so that we can have more of the servant leadership characteristics from our political leaders and our political, I should say our political leaders to become those examples?
That's a political question. I think you'd better handle that one.
Yeah, we don't. I want to, about the political environment. I went to a national meeting for 3 days in Washington, D.C., character education. I came home and I was thunderstruck with my reflection. Not once did anybody bring up a political question in any meeting, and it was a lot of in-depth exchanges. Then the next week I went to England, the UK Greenleaf Center, and they were having their annual meeting. And for 2 days, the same thing. I'm not too sure that we should be paying attention to that. Do you know, in the English language, I was just told by a researcher, there are 15 times more negative words than positive words. Somebody just shook their head there. But now, I don't know what that means. But I will tell you, we have 150 tapes in Wisconsin in these sessions that display to you what is going on in Wisconsin. Servant leaders don't advertise. They don't throw rocks at people. They're not out there pushing a point. They are out there to serve the greater good. The greater good. Lift up the capacity of people, not hit them over the head or throw stones at them. So servant leaders don't come out and say, you ought to do this or that. They just meet your needs. That's how you do it. And if you want to know where to get it, go to the website. We got all these videos. Sean here has been a terrific editor. And they're excellent. Excellent. You can pull them into your group meetings. You can pull them into a discussion group. You can pull them into your classroom, into your company. You can suggest it to other people that have these questions. Questions. That was a little bit too hard, but, thank you for the question. We wouldn't have the discussion otherwise. Questions?
Question was, how do I, with the rules-based really world that law enforcement operates in, kind of work around that to encourage servant leadership for myself and for my team? Well, it is my belief that a lot of what officers do is discretionary. I mean, the law is the law, but a lot of it and our application of it can be discretionary. So giving officers the ability to understand that their thoughts about how they perform their duty is respected and appreciated, giving them and creating an environment where their wellness, their self-awareness is something that we focus on. I was recently at a conference. The International Association of Chiefs of Police holds a yearly conference that's pretty well attended by police chiefs from all over the country. And over the years, the themes have varied. But this year, the majority of the sessions were on officer wellness, on secondary trauma that officers suffer and the potential impact on their ability to do their job and to apply discretion when it's necessary. Also, compassion fatigue was something that was discussed as well. And if you are fatigued with compassion, you truly cannot provide the best service possible. So knowing that those are now concerns, law enforcement is focusing much, much more on our personal wellness and then the ability for us to deliver our service to our communities, respective communities, by just making sure that we're well. Because if we're not well, then the discretion is really flawed. Compassion fatigue is, one of the most important things that I think a police officer can display is compassion for the community that they're serving. And after a while, just as others that are experiencing trauma directly, officers began to kind of absorb that as well. And after a while, it becomes challenging for them to be compassionate or as compassionate as we would like for them to be. They don't see that what they do makes a difference. They don't think that the community supports them or anybody cares about them. And then it makes it a little bit challenging, I think, for them, the decision-making process. So there's a lot of research going on right now to try to determine whether or not, or not determine whether or not, we know it exists, but try to figure out how to make officers more compassionate so that they begin to, I think, conform just a little bit more to what society expects of us and not just what we've done for years, because that's just what we've done.
There's another piece of knowledge, a lady that's writing about this, had written a number of books and speaks, and she would build a case that today versus, say, 50 years ago, or in the past, we have less relationships than we had. As a result, and that people are hardwired, she would use that term, to be with other people. And unless you're with other people, other things can happen. And she would say our cell phones, the disconnect in our society has created less relationships, less family, and as a result, our suicide rate is up. Same thing, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The schools today, number one thing, schools, what do you think number one in the schools are right now? It's definitely in the bullying area and the trauma that results. To the bully, the bullied, and this is interesting, the person that stands by and watches, they are a part of it. So everybody is being trained on how to recognize these problems in schools, and it's a number one priority. It didn't exist 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
I'm looking at the PowerPoint, and the top-down power model is at the top. And my question is, that has been a tried and true approach in many different areas of leadership. How do you persuade people that have done it that way to try something different?
I don't know if you can persuade them, but that is part of the classic skill set of a servant leader, is persuasion. There are times when a servant leader has to be rather explicit, and this is going to be the decision, and explains it, that I've got to make this decision. But most decisions, 98%, can be made by the people doing the work in some form or the other. There is a fellow that runs Quick Trip. It's a big operation. You go in any quick, how many people have been in a Quick Trip? Okay, how many of you would say that it's special? Of the people going Quick Trip, 60% of them said it's special. So just go in a Quick Trip and ask them, how do you like working here? And watch what they say. And they all say the same thing, similar. They love working there. It's an ethical environment. The fellow that runs the place is over 80 years old. I suspect he's one of the guys that talked to the governor and said, hey, I don't know how there's no formula, there's no class, but people within the company can provide an example. If they don't have a power need, they can influence. All of us are influencers. We can raise questions. And servant leadership, I mean, the data, this is a bit old, but the S&P 500 returns on equity is 10.8. The guy that wrote the book on excellence in companies, they had 16.6, and servant leader companies have 24.3. So if the power guy has trouble understanding it, point him over there. If the focus is profit, that's all there is. Drucker said, eventually you'll fail. Now you can have a profit focus, but you've got to have the others as well. In my presentation, I'm going to go over there and check it. There's no answer. It's an evolving, organic, quantum movement. And the high performers tend to be in the servant leader category. Southwest Airlines is another one. The Box Company, they're there. They started off at the beginning that way. Well, Verno. We have the recorder.
We do, she'll be up
Oh, there she
shortly,
is.
but if I
Okay.
could just add one thing, I'm a graduate of Alverno's MBA program, so, hello?
We practice listening. That's one of the tenets. And we want you to tell us, you came here with some expectations. What are those expectations? I'm going to write them up. Fire away.
I want to learn how to be a better leader.
Learn how to be a better leader than I am. Thank you. Others, we've got to fill up a couple of screens here.
Well, if you have a situation when you just don't have the talent on hand to accomplish the goal.
Short of talent. I have an interesting one on that one.
Yeah.
Always. Yes.
So I practice servant leadership in the community development side. I want to see how it's applied in the corporate setting.
Community setting to corporate setting. Excellent. Thank you. Some more.
How does stewardship relate to servant leadership?
How does stewardship relate to servant leadership? Thank you.
Is our children are getting trained or
How are children being influenced
well
to be
in
some
these concepts?
on these concepts?
Yeah.
That's a great
Like
one.
in primary school or high school.
Yes, excellent one. Thank you, sir.
Is it a natural ability or is it something that can be taught?
Oh, that's a wonderful one. Is it natural or does it taught? I love it. Others?
I would like to learn more about how to remain culturally diverse while serving the children that I work with.
How to remain culturally diverse while serving the students you're working with. Does that make sense to you?
I understand exactly
Good,
what you're
good.
saying, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So my role in the community is to bring awareness to the importance of registering to be an organ donor. And to me, that is the ultimate call in serving leadership. So I want to begin to spread that message in conjunction with serving
The
leadership.
question is,
How do I embrace the two of those or put the
donating blood and servant leadership?
No, organ and tissue donation. Register-
How do I promote organ tissue donation? Okay, put it up there.
Our teams to become servant leaders.
How do we help our teams to become servant leaders? Great question. Thank you.
I mean, how to practice servant leadership that if you're working in a culture that might not recognize it or encourage it.
She's got it.
Interested in hearing how others are identifying the needs of their employees or community to serve.
Thank you.
The role of character education in servant leadership, I'd like to know what that connection is.
Okay.
How early do you start that? And when is it ever too late?
Is it ever too late?
Similar to that previous question, how to develop these specific characteristics or attributes of servant leadership?
How to develop the characteristics?
Yes,
Action.
yes.
Very good. Yes, sir.
Remember the second one. I'm interested in understanding how others are balancing the priorities of the business with the priorities of the employees,
Priorities of the business versus the priorities of the employees.
meeting the needs of the
Meeting the needs of employees. Very good question. Was the lady next to you had her hand up? No? No. Okay. Any others? That's a pretty good list. This makes for an excellent day-long seminar.
As anyone who is in servant leadership or is involved in stewardship, you have a driver and you have a passion. This is my driver. This motley crew, my family, I would do anything for them. They are the reason I want to change the world and make it a better place for my nieces and nephews so that they have a future with beautiful Mother Nature, for my parents so that they can be proud and that they can enjoy the environment that they're surrounded in. They are the reasons I do the things I do. So passion is the second part, right? What am I passionate about? I grew up fishing, grew up canoeing, kayaking, running through streams, got the chance to go scuba diving a couple years ago, and being a true Wisconsin girl, I gotta have some beer. So all of those things in common, water. Okay, so maybe I'm a little bit passionate about water. I've developed my career as a wastewater engineer, treating everything you flush down the toilet, making it something that can go back into the environment and protect the environment. Not everyone is as blessed as we are here in the U.S. These are pictures I have taken on stewardship trips that I've been on of communities in Costa Rica where this little boy here is sweeping the raw sewage and gray water coming from his house away from his front steps so his little sister doesn't get sick. Someone has parked their bike in a stream of raw sewage. These are what children are living with today. Couple facts just to kind of bring it home and really help realize what this means. 800 million people, 2 populations of the United States, do not have access to safe water. Again, these are children. These are children in communities I have personally visited. I have taken these pictures. Every 90 seconds, a child dies from a water-related disease. You can see them playing with their little Tonka trucks as sewage runs down the curb line next to them. 2.5 billion people lack access to sanitation. It's equivalent of 8 populations of the United States. Sanitation is something that most of the United States probably doesn't think twice about. They do their business, they flush their toilet, they move on with their lives. 2.5 billion people don't have that amenity. 160 million children suffer from stunting and chronic malnutrition linked to water and sanitation. This is unacceptable. They are our future, and we are stunting them and providing them with diseases when they don't even know any better. So I became a part of Global Water Stewardship in 2014. Doug Nelson kind of said, hey, you're doing this, you're applying for this service trip. And I said, all right, it's a trip to Costa Rica, I'm in. Little did I know that that really would change my life forever. There was a group of 4 of us, my now husband, myself, and 2 other professionals in the industry that kind of went down, assessed the situation and said, holy cow, these people really need our help. How do we do that? And from there, it's been a passion of mine, growing this organization and getting more people involved in and educating them about who we are and how we're here to help. So Global Water Stewardship resolves the sanitation issues in developing the world, in the developing world by educating people and engineering sustainable, centralized solutions to keep waterways clean and communities healthy. So in 5 years' time, we have gone to, I think, 6 different communities where we have provided them with designs for centralized treatment solutions. You can see here, these are their storm inlets, again with raw sewage and gray water coming into them. One community has built up an estuary. They've purposely dammed an estuary so that the garbage and gray water would not flow out into their ocean. They knew enough to protect their ocean beaches, but they have this big, essentially cesspool and septic pool sitting in their backyards. Another thing that I am extremely passionate about, all of my family members, most of them or half of them are teachers. They're involved in the education profession. My adopted family member, Doug Nelson, also involved in education. Something very passionate, something that I really enjoy to do. We go into schools, starting as young as kindergarten through high school, to teach them the importance of keeping their waterways clean, how they can have a role in impacting their environment so that they don't get sick, so that their little sisters and their little brothers don't get sick, and how it really impacts Mother Nature when they take the time to care. We also educate a lot of the community members, because these community members are the ones with the septic tanks in their backyard that are failing. And they don't know any different. They don't know what a centralized system is. They won't know how to operate it. So we've been providing community members with education on what these systems do, and now we're providing seminars on how to train and teach operators for wastewater treatment systems in these communities. And why do we do it? Because this is our future. This group of kids here has never had an adequate source of drinking water. They play in a polluted river. Most of these kids have gone to the hospital because of diseases they have received and picked up from their waterways. This is why we are doing this. Our future matters, and our impact and our knowledge can be brought to them so that they can have a future as bright as the children in our world.
What I thought I would do is just start out by telling 2 stories. And I'm going to tell stories of servant leadership as observed by me, the recipient. And these were 2 of the best bosses that I ever had. And I think these stories just exemplify what it means to be a servant leader now that I'm learning more about it. I actually didn't know that the term existed until Dick shared it with me a year ago. So I was fresh out of Georgia Tech working for the company that ended up buying AT&T, big international communications company. was my first job in sales. I was 23 years old. Was learning how to do sales. Had this boss, Sandy Thornton. Sandy recruited me into the role. Kind of, went on some sales calls with me. Taught me everything she knew, and we were going to call on the president of what at the time, those of you that are students won't know what this means, but the rest of us will. It was the biggest paging company in the world, right? And unless now you're a drug dealer or a doctor, you wouldn't know what that meant. But paging was a big deal back then, and this was a big account, multi-million-dollar account, and we're going to go call on the president of this company. Now, of course, I was going to be there to take notes. She was going to do all the talking. So 9 a.m. meeting, we're in Dallas for this meeting. Sandy calls me at 8 o'clock as I'm getting ready to drive and meet her. She goes, Andy, I've come down with a cold. I'm not going to be able to go, but we can't cancel this meeting. Why don't you just take care of it? Why don't you run it? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, I'm scared. I don't know if I can do it. But she goes, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So I go and I do this meeting, and I'm nervous, but I'm really, really excited because now I'm like negotiating on behalf of this big company in front of this like big president. Meeting goes fine. I come back into the office around 10:30, and there she is in her desk, kind of smiling. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you're not sick, are you? And she's like, no, I'm not sick. Of course I'm not sick. She goes, look, it was time to kick you out of your nest. I knew you could do it. And she goes, the worst you could have done is maybe lost the account for us, but life would have gone on. And her point was, I care more about you. I care more about your development as an employee. I care about your development as a leader than I do about the top line for my company, right? And she had example after example of that, of basically making my career successful. And it felt to me every day that I was working for her like her number one job was to set me off on a launching pad for the rest of my career. We're still friends to this day. She's been retired for 20 years, and I still use her as an example whenever I can. And sometimes when I find myself not living up to her example, I have this reminder of, hey, this isn't how Sandy would have handled it, right? So fast forward maybe 6-7 years later, I just graduated from Harvard with my MBA. Actually wanted to get into everyone wanted to go into banking and consulting. I wanted to get my hands dirty and make something. I applied to GE Healthcare, which actually brought me back to Milwaukee. And I used my connection being from Milwaukee to get a job with GE. I ended up at this basic job in Waukesha. Had a mid-level manager. His name was Dennis Cook. And again, I walked in. He's like, okay, Andy, here's what we're going to do. You're new at GE. I know you've had all these experiences in sales and service and finance. He goes, at GE, it doesn't matter. What matters here is what you've done here and what you've done for this company. So why don't we take the whole day today, and why don't we just map out a vision for what your career is going to look like at GE? Right? And he goes, so you'll work for me for a while, and I'm sure you'll do fine. He goes, assuming that goes well, we've got to get you a job in manufacturing, then we got to get you a job in finance or get you a job in sales, and we've got to get you all these experiences so that eventually you can run your own P&L, you can run your own division of GE. So day one in the job, rather than read this manual, go study this, here's some stuff you got to file, here's some work you got to do, he basically took his entire day to map out the rest of my career. I worked for him for 14 months. It was the hardest I ever worked. It was the longest hours I ever worked, even when I left GE to start my own company. We're working, I remember the Violent Femmes and the Bodines were playing at Summerfest. A bunch of my friends had come into town. We were going to go out. We were going to go to Summerfest. We're all excited. I'm like, I may have to work till 7 tonight, so why don't you come meet me at the office and we all go together. 7 o'clock came, 8 o'clock came, 9 o'clock came. I'm like, sent them on their way. I ended up leaving work at 11 that night. I was a little upset that I missed the Bodines and the Violent Femmes, but we were all there and we were all working for Dennis, and we knew that he was going to take that work and he was going to turn us into heroes. And to us, it didn't really feel like work. We were working for a guy that had our back, that was watching out for our careers. So 14 months into that, plant manager job comes up at GE. He marches me over there. I get the job, but this is the guy who's like an executive, but he's talking to a vice president. He goes, okay, you can have Andy for this job. All right, but after a year and a half, he can't work for you anymore. He's got to go get another experience because that's what he needs for his career. So this is a guy that fought for his people, watched out for us. And again, I felt like half of his job, the applied time on his job, was making me and my peers successful. Now, to me, that's just the way you should do it, right? And in return, we would run through mountains for the guy. We'd work 20 hours a day for the guy, right? And now it's no surprise. We fast forward this 20 some years later. He's the CEO of Ryder, trucks and rentals and whatnot. He's had a tremendous career. Everything he touches seems to turn to gold. But the secret about him, and this is a secret that I've learned and try to practice, he never really did anything, right? And except for teach us how to do our job better, right? And motivate us and give us the fuel that we need to be excited about our careers. And that's what I try to practice now in my, 16, 17 years as an entrepreneur. I spend about 80% of my applied time at work trying to make the people that work for me successful. And I think my proudest achievement, I've had some fun doing a lot of fun stuff, but you ask me what's my best achievement, that I can point to, I think now 12 or 15 people that have worked for me that are now either running their own company, they're their own president, or they're a CEO somewhere. And to me, that's a testament to success. And I hope in the next 20 years of my career that number doubles or triples. So thank you.
I spent 52 years with a company. I spent really a lifetime in servant leadership one way or the other. So I'm going to tell you at 83 what it looks like, in 8 minutes. So what is stewardship? Today it's about stewardship and trusteeship. Andy just made a great statement about the human assets in our society. And a great comment was made about the environment. Well, for me, it includes all these things. It's a personal journey. It's physical for me, and it's spiritual. They go together. I start my morning, and I start with some spiritual. I do some physical stuff, and 45 minutes later, I'm ready to go. It took a lot of years to get that discipline in, but it works for me beautifully. There's professional, there's family, there's time, life itself. There's financial assets. There's your position in society, influence. You all influence a bunch of people. Don't underestimate your influence, your example. The environment. Well, to put this into context, my priorities start with the most important. My maker, my dear partner in life, our children, professional responsibilities, giving back to the community and industry. The use of my time is varied, but generally my formula has been, and up until a year ago, I actually kept track of all these years, is a third family, a third professionally, and a third community. When I was single, at one point, I was 70% community, starting a business up. At one point, professionally, for about 4 years in an international organization, I couldn't believe it. I spent 40% of my time for 4 years turning 3 of us, moving it from point A to point B, and it stuck for 30 years. So that's how that looks. So as a trustee, my personal journey, the physical, the spiritual, what does stewardship look like? Professionally, I think is an easiest way to communicate with you. Safety has always been number one. Who would want to hurt somebody? Who would want somebody to go home in a different condition than when they came to work? So in our company, it's the safest place in your life is at work, and we have a company that has risks. Normally in the past, we have been 300% better than the industry average. That's a lot. And it escalated up, still exceptionally well. Employees. Who delivers the services? We're in a service business. There are few companies that aren't in the people business. In fact, I don't think any, but some are more intense than others. We're totally people. Without the people, you can't do anything. I always start with them personally. Where are you at? What are you trying to do? What are the elements of your life? And then I give them feedback or give them some suggestions. I have little home runs regularly. I take anybody that's legitimately interested in professional development and I'll mentor them. I don't have to know them, but they got to give me some information first. When I'm done doing an in-depth interview, they'll end up with something they agree would be good for them to do, and don't come back until you do it. I mean, that is the way I operate. So people are important. It is kind of what we've made for. Customers, they are the people we serve. They pay the bills. We have to add value to customers. If you can't add value long term, somebody else will. Vendors, bankers, bonding companies, those who service us, they are all part of the family. They all need to be respected in what they do. Vendors, we used to do an annual survey with the people that did the work and say, what do you think of this vendor? Shipments, purchase orders, pickups at the counter for emergencies, and they would rate them all. And we would share that with our vendors. And the best guy got a plaque. And boy, they put that plaque right up in front of everything. Very proud to have received it. Never had received it before. So that's what the business looks like. Now, let's take a look at the stewardship part of it. You could say that with stewardship, but I'll get more explicit. In the family, early on, Sue and I agreed, young teenagers, that our estate would go back to the community. I mean, I'm just a steward. I'm passing through. What am I going to do with it after I'm gone? A lot of people like to, everybody has their own way of doing this. And by the way, I used to consider myself a grain of sand on the beach. And then I start sailing the oceans in the world. And I looked up at night when I was on night watch, and it was just magical. To think that I was a grain of sand on the beach when I look up at this gorgeous, brimming with brightness sky, and I said, this is really silly. I am a particle inside of an atom, and the universe, as far as we know it, is 52 billion light years from one end to the other. And we think there's one universe, but we're now finding out there are more universes than we have stars in our sky. Our Earth is 13 billion years old. So anybody that thinks they got the answer is kind of silly. It's a moment in time. So I've always gone at things with that premise. I'm always curious and always asking. So in the family, we prepared our children for life. The way we raised them, the examples that we hope we provided. As I mentioned before, nobody's in jail and nobody's in the hospital, and our kids are turning 50. So it's okay. No divorces, which is really unusual. That's a blessing. I had nothing to say about that. And we have 11 grandchildren, the oldest of which is now in college. She's 21 or 22. The youngest is 11 or 12. I can't keep track of them all. It keeps changing. And they're all doing fine, each in their own way. Other people would tell me they're exemplars. Professionally, the company, 52 years. Started the company with an ethic kind of, was repelled in New York from, I wonder when, World's Fairs. Ran one very successfully with no money, because I got there and my partner said, well, Dick, we're going to split the profits, but I don't have any money left, and you got to run a worldwide promotion. So we did. And after the first day, the exhibitors said, everything you've done, we don't have to have anything for the rest of the week, and we're ready to sign up for your next show. But I got really educated in New York. And I decided I didn't want to run World's Fairs. So I came back, effectively bought my dad's business, 3 to 6 people. When there was 3, he had cash in the bank. When there was 6, he was short. That's how he kept his accounting. Told him what I wanted to do, and he said, fine, you do that with your money, and you take care of all the problems. I just want to do what I've been doing and make what I've been making. So that began the journey of this ethical model that you could go to when the I system was coming in, up and down the expressways across the country, and count on them to give you rational pricing, good service, a predictable operation. And that was the model. Years later, they said, we want to write this down, people. We like what this is. We got to write it down and tell people. I said, no, just provide the example, please. Just people understand what you do, not what you talk about. And so I said, go ahead and write it down. No, you write it down and we'll approve it. So I wrote it down. The teachings of the Old Testament, the example of Jesus. And so that's how we proceeded, and after about 5, 6 years into the business. Now the problem is, you've made a decision that you're going to give everything back to the community. You're getting your children started very well. Education means experiences as well as education. We would put experiences higher than the actual classroom. And they were all pretty well suited, and they all were quite different. So what do you do with the biggest single asset you have? Well, 10 years of ruminating, asking everybody. We said we're going to sell it to the employees, not an ESOP, just a straight sale. They got to keep their cash has got to buy it, and we'll sell it to them what effectively was 10% of the value. That was a $110 million gift to the employees. They have to sell it the same way we sold it. They can't merge it. They can't sell it. They can't liquidate it. And the way in which the stock is bought and sold will continue. Now, you can't do that legally. So we have a D stock that has super voting rights that you have to get the D stock to agree to that. And the D stock is outside directors in a family foundation, controlled by them, approved by the IRS. Lovely IRS story there. I mean, lovely IRS story. Not what you would expect. But it took 5 years. And they kept checking and checking and checking. They were, what's the deal here? I will tell you in that context also, there are people in the company that work for us, and after about 5 years or so, they'll say, Dick, sit down, I want to tell you something. I came into the company, and after a couple of years, I said, yep, what you're doing, you're actually doing what you say you're doing. But I've spent years trying to figure out what the angle is. And I just figured it out, and I want you to know, there isn't any angle. There isn't any angle. We're just the stewards, my perception. Now, what do you do with the rest of the money? You get real estate and stocks. My uncle told me how to invest in stocks, buy it to low, sell it to high. My folks told me how to invest in real estate. You buy and keep and do your own maintenance and all that sort of thing. So we did a little of all that. All did well. Everything kept growing because we were good stewards. That's my whole focus. I'm not economically motivated at all. But if you have something, use it well. I consider it a gift to me. Now, I worked really hard my whole life. I still am at things that I really feel passionate about. So the rest of the money we have put into 2 community foundations and 1 private foundation, the funds to support character education nationally, character education in Wisconsin substantially, and servant leadership in the world. And all 2 of those organizations have to do is balance their budget once in 2 years, and they get a nice chunk of money. And that's in perpetuity. So that's what we've done with the rest of the money, and that's still evolving. That model is running. We're just moving assets and getting people accustomed to this process. So that's community.
When Elijah Cummings died, I had a very sick feeling that servant leadership died with him. That's a true feeling. However, during his funeral, there was a sign up that said, the Honorable Elijah Cummings. And there was a comment that was made in his eulogy that said, Elijah Cummings was honorable before he became a congressman. Can you relate that to servant leadership?
I think honor and ethics and virtue comes first. Now, what you do when you're a political person, I don't know. But I know some splendid political people, and I'm not going to have a political discussion, not going to use any names. But I know 2 political people that coupled with a third one, and they made a blood oath when they were students in college that they were going to go out and remind all the world leaders about the poor. That was their whole mission for the rest of their lives. High-end senator, a man that bridged all politics, was the chaplain of one of the units, and they did it. Now, they've just been, there's a price for leadership, and They're all dead right now. Last funeral was a year ago. I knew them. I knew what they did. I've met people all over the world that they've affected. And they have talked to all the worst guys in the world. And the way they got to talk to them is they had a method. And they didn't get their heads chopped off, and they didn't get thrown in jail. So it's with each one of us. We got the bird in the hand. You're going to crush it, or you're going to release it. It's up to us. There's a political system. As one elected representative told me, Dick, what goes in counts, but what comes out the other end you will never recognize.
I think I heard it from two people. They talked about what if you're not this by nature? And someone asked the nature versus nurture question, and Sigrid said, how do you change someone into becoming this? Because I have a very strong opinion on this.
Do it.
I say you can't, right? And so if you're the employee and you're deciding where to go work, and you find yourself working for one of these other people that isn't practicing servant leadership, you just leave. You have to leave. You're not going to change them. And then when you're the one doing the hiring, all right, this is very important to me. We try to learn somebody in an hour-long interview or by doing some assessments, but sometimes we get fooled, right? And when you make that hiring mistake, they're out. I don't think you can teach people values that they've learned over 20 years. In fact, we have a matrix. It's performance versus values. And if you're nailing it in both, we promote you, we do everything we can, we give you more money, we push you on in your career. If you're doing neither, you're out. If you're making it in values and you're not making it in performance, what do you think we do there? You train them, you develop them. Maybe they're in the wrong role. Maybe you take them from sales into customer service, right? Those are people you want to keep, right? Those are diamonds. You just have to figure out where they're going to fit in your organization. How about the ones who are making you look like heroes with their performance, beating their sales quotas, new products coming out on time, on budget, but there's a values breach. They're either doing it at the expense of the organization or whatever else, or there's an integrity breach. What do you do with those people? Yep, out. They're out without a second chance. Those are the hardest ones to let go, but you have to maintain the integrity of your culture if you want a value-based organization. So to me, I used to bang my head up against the wall trying to change my boss or change this, and I've just learned from my experience, you can't. So I just prefer to work with people who have these values in the first place.
I agree with that. In my professional career, I would say that I would go at them 2 and 3 times, normally working with younger people. But sometimes you just can't, and they have to find a new job. That's the way I approach it. Let us help you get another job.
As an organizational development and leadership student, we're learning something different. So we're learning that you may have the challenge of someone working for you, but doesn't necessarily believe in the same servant leadership values, but perform. Do you not be a leader, a servant leader to them? Do you not serve them? And so we're learning that you have to serve them as well. So I'm just...
This is your opinion about how to do it.
Right. Okay. Certainly, you guys have more experience than I do, but I just wanted to note that we're actually learning a little bit something different.
I go at it 3 times, and it's 1 time too many, because the 3rd time I've never moved anybody. But 2 times, everybody makes a mistake. 2nd time, then you look, are they in their right position? Yes or no? If you've hired them and you've done your due diligence, you've interviewed them in depth, you've placed them in a position you thought they were going to be successful, 75% of the responsibility is yours, 25% is theirs. I just went through something this summer. Hired somebody, they totally misrepresented themselves. Just absolutely did. And we were snowed. That's a big mess. I have a story to tell you on a company named Total Systems. Their backroom operations around the world with credit cards. Big, big company. And we were at a conference, we were at a pre-conference there, and the president of the company was going to speak to us about servant leadership. And so we're all waiting for the president to come. We're waiting. And the personnel person is filling in, and they're talking about their data. And then I raised my hand and I said, how do you measure the golden rule? And then some guy in the front row, right down the front, turns around. He said, the golden rule. We search everybody who doesn't use the golden rule. We look in the closets under the tables. When we find the guys that don't do that, or gals, they're out. He had a lot of horrible experiences. Everybody needs feedback, and sometimes that feedback is better than going along and having them seduce themselves. Be kind in what you do, point them in a direction, but make a decision. To sit there and try to help somebody move, they're not willing to move or they're not appropriate, you're doing them a great disservice. That's just what I did for 52 years. Another question.
I wanted to touch on that as well. So I think in more of the same line as you are. I tend to lead by example. When I'm working with a lot of our younger staff, there are some of them who are not engaged, who are not involved, who are not interested per se. They're coming out of school, totally different mindset of what they expected work to actually be like. So when I'm working with them and they see me in my role as a manager and as a leader and as a senior engineer, and then they see everything I'm able to do in servant leadership and stewardship, I try and work that into every day when I'm talking to them, keep bringing it in front of them, keep making sure that they understand that this is something that our company believes in, that I'm passionate about, and sure enough, I've seen it in 2 or 3 of our younger staff engineers that have gotten extremely involved in the same organization, have really blossomed in their careers and their involvement in extracurricular activities above and beyond. So I'm in the same boat as you. I like to lead by example. They can take my energy and use it towards something that they're also passionate about.
Questions?
I have one for Amanda.
Yes.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about cultural challenges you faced in Costa Rica and how you've overcome them?
Yeah, I don't speak Spanish. That's a big cultural challenge. It's interesting as you're down there, you start to understand what they're saying, but I have no clue how to respond back. So what that has led us to do, the first time we were down there, we met up with someone, and I forget what organization he was with. He was down on a stewardship trip as well, and he was able to act as our translator. And as we have grown, the next year we reached out to someone else in our industry, and he's like, well, yeah, I'm from Dominican Republic, I can speak the language. And he was able to speak not only the language, but also understand the technical side. So really what we've been able to do and what we've been very blessed for is participants who've said, hey, we recognize your cultural lack in this area. Let me help you out. We're excited about what you're doing. We will work with you to make sure that this continues to move forward. So that is definitely one of the cultural challenges we faced.
Let me comment on that in a different view, but it's based on a 60-year-old after 45 years of experience. Sailed around the world. When we went into the ports, I was the captain, the crew were my friends. We go into the ports. We didn't go through the tourist thing. Going through the tourist thing, the airport, put you on buses, take you to the right spots, put you back on the plane. And this was through the ports, the bowels of the city or the country. Yemen, Egypt, right through all those places. And what I found is if your heart is right, you got to look in the mirror and figure that out. If your heart is right, the people, and they know you respect them, whatever their procedure is, whatever their process is, I respect it. They're there doing a job, what they understand to be their job. In this country, 50% of the people have a different understanding of their job than their boss. So if they did everything perfectly, 50% of the time they're going to lose. So I respected whatever they were doing. Sometimes they weren't even there. So I'd ask somebody else, let me help you, some other stranger. Puts me in his car and takes you over. He says, oh, I'll tell you what's happening, because I didn't speak their languages either. He said, they haven't been paid for 3 months. So that's a different kind of world. but no place, no country, at least 150 countries, did I find people that wouldn't come to your aid with no expectations in return. But you've got to be transmitting, not verbally, just you and your demeanor, what you're thinking about, how they're dressed, the streets, respectfully. And respect is a character trait. And it falls right into leadership, whether you're leading or people are following you.
When you're a chief volunteer and you're working with volunteers, you don't fire volunteers, right? Right? But you do fire employees, and I do. And look, you lie, cheat, or steal, you don't get a second chance. There's some gray areas in there, of course, right? So I approach the volunteer work sort of similar to the business work in this way. You know what the best way to make someone think you care about them, you know what it is? The best way you can actually make someone think that you care about them? To actually care about them, right? That's it. I don't think you can fake that, is the point. And so when I approach my volunteer work, I start, and I did not do this, I made some mistakes early on. I start by taking what I think my skill sets might be and then marrying those with my passions, right? Back when I was new executive, wide-eyed in Milwaukee, someone said, oh, you need to join, I'm not going to say the organization because I have a lot of respect for it, you need to join their board. That's where all the CEOs are. You're in the power circles in Milwaukee. So I go off and I join that board. And after a couple meetings, I look around, I'm like, why am I in this room? And then they start talking about what they're looking for. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I don't belong here. I'm like a fish out of water. I don't have anything to add to this group. So I kind of graciously bowed away. So now I volunteer for the things I'm passionate about. My undergrad, which like Alverno and MSOE and other great schools just formed me into who I am today. And I had a transformative time there. It took me from nothing to a little more than nothing, and it changed my life. So I give a lot back to that. The symphony that I'm passionate about, I played French horn as a kid. I go to the symphony, that's my thing. The art museum, we collect art, that's kind of my thing. So when you approach it with that passion, and then you know the mission of the organization, you're aligned, then you do kind of have to deal with what you get in that organization. And so, for me, I just approach it as I focus on the areas that I'm good at. I stay away from the areas I'm not. So for example, I'm not on the audit committee, right? I'm not on any of these finance committees because that's not my thing. I'm more of the sales and marketing type, and I focus on that stuff. But to your question, how do you deal with a volunteer that may not approach life the way you do, that has different values, that may not practice servant leadership? That I don't have an answer for. I don't know. I find that very frustrating, and I kind of run away from it. You can either, to me, fight, hide, or flee, and I hide and flee with those things because I don't know how to handle that yet. Maybe Dick has a better answer.
Well, we have a model here, intended to be a model, of Wisconsin servant leadership. 5 cities, 2,500 people. Each city runs separately, all volunteer, not a 501c3, and no paid people except an administrative person in my office, which does a lot of other things. So that model has been recorded for the last 12 years. Everything we've done, every city operate, and they're all unique, and it's all volunteer. And there are transitions, not very many actually, because they came with the right heart. We have the same thing in character education, very similar. There's more money that goes into character education. It also is the toughest state, most challenging state in the union, education, for trying to move anything, told by people outside. So it's all right here. It's right here. The model is on our webpage. Here's an overview of servant leadership in Wisconsin. I would ask you, Mickey, who is one of the co-chairs at Concordia, and as your faith might allow, she has a tumor on her brain. Very serious stuff. She's taken a leave of absence, and please remember her and all those that are servicing her. Here's the Wisconsin committees, our website, Milwaukee roundtables, as they noted, It's all on the website. Lacrosse, they're meeting tomorrow with their citywide meeting. They have a book discussion. They have a summer conference. You've got the email addresses, but they send out stuff once a month as well. Fond du Lac is a whole different proposal. It's a different operation. It's the third Friday of each month. Green Bay has quarterly meetings, big meetings. And Joe up there handles that. Madison it's more intellectual. At this point, we're looking for some people that might want to take it citywide as opposed to the analytical. A well-kept secret. Greenleaf Center, Monday Morning Message, Greenleaf Org and blogs, Greenleaf Scholars, Best Test. Greenleaf Scholars now has 32 scholars that have gone through that. They have now become, one of them, a pair of them, produced a paper that went worldwide in the most prestigious management journal in the world. And that journal, the article in that journal has had the highest hits of anything they've ever had. There's a lot of this going on. This tells you how frequently, if you Google servant leadership, lead by serving, or applied ethics, this is how many hits you get. Lead by serving has nothing behind it. It's just an idea of saying it one way than the other. Servant leadership has deep academic things that have developed, a big foundation, and that's at the university level. But it affects us, the way books are written, and the way organizations function. Here is, and this is on our webpage, research and the understanding of this for those that are interested. There's a lot more. If you go to Google Scholars and you put servant leader, you'll find all these folks and the number of articles that have been downloaded, which is a pay thing. This is the big, big deal. In 2009, we had a national conference in Milwaukee. The result of that conference, everybody was so excited about it, went off very well, is we asked a group of people to come together at the end of the meeting if they were interested in doing a statewide thing. So a group came together, and what they told us is, we didn't know there was other people that felt or thought this way. And that began the process. Lacrosse and Milwaukee were somewhat functioning. Dan came up with the idea of these roundtables. And again, those roundtables, there's a card. You can have them in your company, in your institution, or in the community. And the cards are out there that you can take. They're also on our webpage as to how you conduct those meetings. How many people in here have been to a roundtable? 60%. So try a roundtable. Find one that suits you, one that fits your schedule. There's 5 a month in Milwaukee. We have right now, we just had a meeting last Saturday, a big meeting. All the chairs, it's all volunteer, all the chairs, and we have had 42 breakout sessions that we thought would be effective. And we know people behind them, so it would be good. Then we put it out to the world. What have you got? We got 82 proposals, and we're processing those 82 proposals. And we did that Saturday, and we're doing it some more. And we have 3 different categories we're going to go out and do some searching. So we're going to have a ton of things to select from. There's keynoters, Hunter. Another keynoter is going to be a Wisconsin guy living in California who is a commander of the SEALs. Forgot the exact title he has. 2,000 people in the war group. I mean, really tough characters. This is a man that would say to you without a doubt, yes, it may cost us our lives, but that is our job. I said, why do you do that? He says, well, it's for the nation, it's for my family and the generations to come. No question about it. They will sacrifice. They do the job, highly trained. He's going to share his story. He's produced a book. He's a speech maker. But in our case, he's just going to come and share. And then another man who has been around a long time, Mandela has read his books. And I've never been in the room, I've known him for 20 years. I've never been in the room where he didn't get a standing ovation instantly. He has a lot to say, and what he has to say is about his own story. It's character education and servant leadership brought together is what he really talks naturally about. And he does it through his own life example. Very smart guy. So that is what's coming to Wisconsin. Now, this is all volunteer. We're using the Greenleaf Center as the 501c3. We need you, as this program evolves, to send out to your friends and others the links, can have them consider looking at it. It's going to be a very special time. It'll be 3 days. The first day will be academic, be an academic track. There will be an all-day looking at all elements of servant leadership with a group of high-end folks in the world who will talk to those various elements. And then there'll be a section for folks that come together that just want to talk, like a half a day conversation. There's a group of people that are interested in that. Day one. Day two will be a normal plenum speaker, breakout sessions, plenum speakers, breakout sessions. And Wednesday evening will be some kind of a big thing down at the lakefront to show Milwaukee. It's going to be held here because it's much less expensive. And we're going to bus people from the Hampton Inn and others to keep the cost down. It's very affordable. Right now, with some provisions, you can get a super rate for this world-class conference. So look at it, pass it around. We have cards on the table you can put on bulletin boards where you think would be appropriate to attract like-minded people. The essence of everything we've done here usually is I just come here and I get filled. It's like-minded people, and I want to meet more of them.